Hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to another critique of the week. So glad you could join me. We were off last week. You probably know there was a forest fire. Mentioned it on the Rattlecast on Monday, but there was a forest fire, burned down all the telephone lines. They all had to be replaced in our leading up to our mountain town, and so we had no power all day Friday, or Thursday, or like Tuesday and Sunday. So we had no critique of the week last week, but we're moving on and doing it this week. Everything is back to normal. Everything feels great. There's actually a thunderstorm came through and knocked out the power again yesterday, which is why the Ekphrastic Challenge poem ended up being Friday instead of Thursday. I couldn't add it because we had power outage again. This time just because the thunderstorm knocked it out. So I guess the grid is not doing so hot after the fire. But anyway, it's great to be here. And I switched the music, and I shouldn't be talking over the music because on Facebook now they're starting to call this music. We use the free library music from YouTube. It's the background music because it's copyright free, but we're starting to get like copyright notices on Facebook for using it, and so they're silencing it. So I have to be very careful not to talk and overlay the music, which would be nice, but they silence it. So then if you're watching on YouTube, they cut out my voice too. So that's not good. But we'll see. I used Edge of Eternity by Nora. What's her name? Norma. I can't remember. It only says Norma R. It's Edge of Eternity. That was the background music there. The old one, which is public domain music on the free or Creative Commons licensed, is Tiptoe Out the Back Door. And again, I can't see who the artist was. Sorry about that. It says it on YouTube. Anyway, we have two poets as always, or as a typical show anyway. We have Megan Wildhood here, and we have Todd Musser. And I haven't looked at either of these, so this is going to be one of those critiques of the week where it feels like looking at a submission. Like I just open up my box, I see a poem like this. This is how it works. Yeah, let's see. So we have Nate Jacob here. We have Ethna. We have Cindy Gore. We have Katie Dozier. Hey, Katie. We have Karen Harvey. Cindy Gore's here. Dick Westheimer's here over on Facebook. We've got Nate Jacob and Atma Franz, Mark Grinier, Jenny Middleton. Good to see you all. Sharon Fronte and Joe Barca, too. Okay, so as always, you know what the thing of the critique of the week is. We sit around critiquing poems and sharing that workshop experience that not everybody might have access to. You might not have friends, like I don't have friends. You might have, no access to, MFA program or something where these workshops are great, where you can sit around and have a critique around a poem. So we do it here. So leave as many comments as you can if you're new to this, and I will pass as many along on the stream, but the poets can also read them after the fact. And so leave the comments there for the poets to read, and then we all learn in the process. It's a great thing. So let's get to it. Now here's the first poem. This is a work-study gig in the audio-visual department. After I found... Oh, and this is Megan Wildhood, I should say. A work-study gig in the audio-visual department. After I found my God, the founder of running water, the world asked me to project the same person I was before. It would be a display, but this is the new reality. The slides of cultures, achievements, plantings past dazzle, inspire. They are flat. Experience is the proud fire of identity. Now you don't even have to put on your shoes. Drag pixels to pixels. Feel all the feelings, but no water moves. Trouble. We are more water than human. Flow is not just for gurus. Stagnant water breeds mosquitoes, spawns of Satan. The foundation, themself, tan with misuse, crouched between the blue and the trouble, waiting for me, us. This is the first poem. This was Megan Wildhood again. A work-study gig in the audio-visual department. Start out with the title. I love this title. I thought it was great. I mean, a work-study gig in the audio-visual department. And that really sets the place. It lets us know where we are. And it's interesting. I mean, it's a very vivid kind of description of the setup of what's going in. It makes me curious about what's going to happen. What's going to happen with this work-study gig at the audiovisual department? So I'm interested in the poem, and that's one of the main things you want to do with a title is make you want to read the poem, and that does it for me. After I found my God, the founder of running water, The world asked me to project the same person I was before. So this is about as far. So I think the issue with the poem to me, just reading it once through, is clarity, because I don't really know what's going on here. And I think up to about here, I'm willing to go with that. Like the title kind of buys you a stanza maybe of being lost. So a work-study gig in the audiovisual department, because we know where we are and it was an interesting title. I'm interested still. After I found my God, the founder of running water, the world asked me to project the same person I was before. That's very interesting. I have no idea what it really means. Like, who is the God of running water? It's hard to follow. I should also point out, I think Joe Barca mentioned already, that there's great sounds in it. After I found my God, the founder of running water. So there's a great rhythm to that. The world asked me to project the same person I was before. And good line breaks too. Yeah, and so as Joe Barker says again, making the mundane into the sublime, and that's kind of what we do here. We have this a technical kind of situation, a real life situation. Then we jump into the God of running water, which is interesting. So I'm holding my attention here. It would be a display, but this is the new reality. And there I'm starting like this is where I start to wonder what's going on. The slides of cultures, achievements, paintings, past, dazzle, inspire. I think here, if you listen to me how I read it the first time, I tripped over this because there's no punctuation here. I think there should be a dash. Because past dazzle is how I read it, as if it was one continuous, plantings are past their dazzle. And then when you get to inspire, it doesn't make sense. So there's definitely needs to be some kind of punctuation there. They are flat. They are flat. I guess the cultures are flat. See, so here I'm starting to get a little lost and feeling like, I don't know. I'm feeling like it's hard to follow. Experience is the proud fire of identity. That's a great line. I like that. In isolation, I'm still not sure how to piece it together with everything else. Now you don't even have to put on your shoes. Again, that's a good line too. And I think the nice contrast between the what would you say, like the epigrammatic nature of this line or something, and then the down-to-earth nature of this one. You don't even have to put on your shoes. Yeah, Nate Jacobs puts it how I'm feeling about it. Beyond the first stanza, this is Nate, I kept looking for the thread to pull. It becomes a bit too cryptic, required too much effort for me to easily enjoy it, but I really do want to like it. Lots of good bones. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Now you don't even have to put on your shoes. Drag pixels to pixels. I like that line a lot too. That's another good one. Because that's kind of what we do at work, right? I mean, we're just constantly like sliding documents and dropping things into, and they're just dragging pixels into pixels. I love the way that's put. Feel all the feelings, but no water moves. Trouble, we are more water than human. Flow is not just for gurus. Stagnant water breeds mosquitoes, spawns of Satan. I don't really like this. I'd probably get rid of the aside. And let us decide how we feel about mosquitoes instead of making it that sort of in your face. Let's see. Flow is not just for gurus. But see, I'm having trouble. I'm having trouble with this trouble. But no water moves. We are more water than human. And of course, the body is like 82% water or something. But I mean, I don't know. Flow is not just for gurus. Stagnant water breeds mosquitoes. Spawns of Satan. The foundation, themself. Tan with misuse. I love this phrase, tan with misuse. That's another good line right there. Tan with misuse. Crouch between the blue and the trouble, waiting for us. Me. So I mean, maybe if people can help me out with what the. Let's see. So yeah, here Dick Westheimer is saying, I think the narrator has literally found God, as in a religious awakening, as in she has changed. Living normally would be a display. That's an interesting interpretation. Yeah, I think I could see that there. Katie Dozier says, excellent title, puts me in the mood to jump into a detail of the gig right away. It does, yeah. I mean, with the title, I think what works about the title, why I liked it right off the bat, It's because we were so clearly set where we were, and and then the poem doesn't really deliver on that. I would love if that's what it really is, the interpretation of it, which I can definitely see. I think that makes sense. But why running water? I guess that's what I come back to. Like, why is it the god of running water? And it's just too much. I mean, I've read the poem twice now. Why that god and not some other god? The founder of running water. The world asked me to project the same person I was before. So like Dick said, I like this. I like the concept of what's going on in the poem here. But why the god of running water? Just because we happen to be mostly made of water. I mean, water is really important. If there was a molecule to call God, we'd definitely think of water. And then oxygen would probably be Satan. But foundation themselves, tan with misuse. See, I'm just having trouble following it, is all. Katie Dozier says, are they washing their hands before handling film? Yeah, that's a good suggestion. I mean, maybe it... After I found my God, the founder of running water, the world asked me to project the same person I was before. It would be a display, but this is the new reality. The slides of cultures, achievements. So we go into this like abstraction here. The slides of cultures, achievements. I think that probably is the issue with me for the poem is right here. If we went here into specific detail about the job and what was really going on and we got a sense of the setting where we were positioned in the poem, I think the poem would work for me. I like the concept of it. I like the setup of it. But instead we go to the slides of cultures, achievements, plantings past, dazzle, inspire. They are flat. So now is this her working in some kind of film imagery place? This is the audio-visual department. So we're looking at these, slides. But experience the proud fire of identity. Now you don't even have to put on your shoes. So D. Coleman is saying, I'm thinking audio-visual department full of slides and old projectors, film canisters, etc., all holding data about the history and culture, but flat compared to one's actual life. Yeah, I like that interpretation. Okay, so how does that get to the god of water, though, or the founder of running water? I mean, that's just the thing that's leaving me out. And I think this makes sense when you look back to the title, but there's no sort of sense of being grounded there. Like I would like to see, so we talk about the eye. We already have the eye established. So why not like situate myself and show a little bit of the room and like what's going on so we can feel like we're there, instead of jumping right to the slides, which are sort of up on a screen or somewhere like that. I assume they're on a screen. And just show what's actually going on, and just ground us a little bit in the actual moment of being in the audiovisual department. Katie Dozier puts it like this: a lot of good lines. I think the poem could benefit from more concrete actions that could allow the mundane of daily work to be juxtaposed to the abstractions. Yeah, exactly. It's just missing that grounding of that was existed in the title. I think the title is enough to carry you a little ways, but it doesn't hold your sense of tether to reality long enough to sustain the poem. So drag pixels to pixels, feel all the feelings, but no water moves. So we get back to this water, which I just don't understand. Trouble, we are more water than a human. The flow is not just for gurus. So Katie says, founder of running water is like a baptism of the hands before holding all these historic slides, I think. But why water? I just don't understand the water aspect. And the water aspect is so central to the poem. And it comes back. We talk about more human than water. The flow of water somehow. Is it just that? Is this just saying that we're sitting here in a chair? And the water that our cells are holding isn't actually moving because we're stuck in a chair in an office. But the foundation themselves, tan with misuse, crouched. So tan with misuse. I love that line, but it's hard to figure. I just don't understand how this water god fits in. And so Dick here, Dick Westheimer puts, of course, all this effort to understand the poem renders the great images mute. As a reader, I don't care for this much mystery. I can't even address craft when so confused by content. Maybe life flowing, but recorded history and culture is not, says D. Coleman. Yeah, I think we half get the poem. I think the, but this God part, it's just too much to untangle, I think. So just make it more clear. And that's the issue. Let's see. Going back to Facebook. So Jenny Middleton says photos of old negatives. As I was thinking, when I see audio visual department, I think of digital now. But Jenny Middleton says photos on old negative film are immersed in water to develop them. And I guess maybe digitizing photos, that would make sense. So we have these pans of, it's not really water, but like the chemicals that we use to develop film. Let's see. Yeah, so we're surrounded by these trays of all the development chemicals, which is kind of like water. And maybe they do, if you're in a dark room doing that, I have vague recollections of like sort of flickery water from the red light, like on the walls kind of, because there are like pools of water. I don't know. I mean, if that's it. And then, turning old prints, old negatives to digital. This might be her job at the audio visual department, or the speaker's job, I should say. So maybe that's it. But see, it's just taking way too much. Like, nobody is going to read a poem in a magazine and stare at it for, 15 minutes and trying to pick together what's actually going on. And so that's the issue. Like, you have to give it to us in a way that we can comprehend what's going on, so that we can appreciate all the rest of the stuff and be moved and learn from it and do all the things that poetry does. So my advice to make it as clear as this line. Like, make the poem, what's going on in the poem should be as clear as the title. And that shouldn't be the end of the clarity. And then what happens with the God of, I love the idea of the God of running water, if I knew what it meant. And then being immersed in this room and what that means when you have a profound experience, but then you're doing this mundane task, dragging pixels to pixels. I think that works really well as a poem. It's just the clarity is an issue. My friend says, I like the notion of the narrator not wanting to be a display in the audiovisual department. Oh, Jenny Middleton says afterwards the chemicals are cleaned in water, I think. Yeah, I think well, now I'm trying to remember. Maybe. We did that. It was a long time ago. We had a dark room in my high school. I don't know. I can't remember. But yeah, you're probably right. So I think that's what's going on. I just like to see it more clearly. Hey, Katie Dozier points out that this highlights a difficult aspect of writing what we know. Sometimes we can overestimate others' knowledge of the subject. Yeah, that's true. And it's really just a matter of clarity and giving us the setting, though. Like, it's really cool to learn things. I mean, that's like one of my favorite things about poetry is learning about something that I don't really know that much about. So if I could learn more about the developing and digitalization process through this poem, that would be really cool. And I would love that aspect, while also exploring these concepts of having a more profound experience than your work, which I think is the heart of the poem, at least as I'm interpreting it. Veena Kumar says, it all just makes me want to look up ancient plumbing systems. It's funny. That always reminds me of that. There's a great David Wagner poem we published called The Plumber's Nightmare. Every time some plumber, we just had once a year we have to have our sprinkler system checked for backflow to make sure because we're up in the cold environment, so there has to be like antifreeze in it, and you can't let that backflow in the water supply. So it's got this like backflow regulator. It needs to be certified once a year. And I'm paranoid because it's like $4,000 to fix it. So they test it, takes 5 minutes, and you pay them $100, and then it passes, or you pay $5,000. So that was this morning. But every time I think of that, I think of The Plumber's Nightmare by David Wagner. Look up that poem. We won't share it right now, though. Okay, let's move on to the next poem. I think we covered this one as well as we can. The next is commute. So again, we guess to get the work type theme, maybe. Commute. And again, this is Megan Wildhood. Much heft to get from A to B, translated day in and day out to importance. We pray it's not just wishful thinking, and there is plenty of time for prayer, or audiobooks, or music, or me time. So many translations of stuck in traffic with the rest of the world's workers. Much heft to get from mass exposure to city, machine and hammer translating earth into employment, and reroutes and traffic delays. You are a revolutionary, even if you are part of the traffic, if you are not yet tricked into thinking that they are building the world. Well, that's interesting too. Commute. Much heft to get from. So the title again is something that gives us some access to the poem. It's not as interesting as the last title, so it doesn't make me as curious to read, but it serves a purpose. It lets us know what's going on. So that's and if you, another thing, I don't know how to really juggle it always, but I always wonder about this, because in a book, there's some titles that work really well to make you curious to read the poem, but it's sort of like a trick that you can't do over and over again. So I always wonder about that, because sometimes maybe you should have simple titles that are just explanatory, just so the better titles stand out more. I don't know. That's something that I've never heard anybody talk about or figure out how to deal with. It just happens naturally in like in a magazine like Rattle. If you look at the table of contents, some are really interesting, cool titles, and some are just kind of flat and tell you what's going on. And I keep going back. I love this. I think it was Kim Stafford. Was that him? Who said you should write a title that just explains it. Then you should write a short title, a long title, and then one that a weird title. And so make 3 titles and pick your favorite. And the short title usually just explains it. The longer title gets at the mood a little bit more, and then the weird title is usually everybody's favorite. And I love that little bit he said. I think that works well, but you kind of get that through looking through titles in a book or in a magazine or something. Some are interesting, some are short and kind of flat and just tell you what's going on. Some are weird and really make you want to read the poem. So I don't know. I mean, you're kind of competing with everybody in the magazine, or even if it's like posted on social media. Like if on Rattle, on our Facebook or Twitter account, I mean, not many people on our Twitter account, but on Facebook, I think about 1 out of 10 people click on average when they see the title, the title displayed in the name. And but if it's a better poem, sometimes it's 1 in 5, and you want to be the 1 in 5. So that's what an interesting title can do. Make you the 1 in 5 instead of the 1 in 10. Then you have more people reading it and more synergy around your work and stuff. So I don't know. Anyway, Commute. Yeah, Katie Doder says Regulation was a great recent title, even though it appeared very simple. Yeah, it's interesting too, because sometimes the simple titles have like a double entendre, or I don't know. There's just a lot to think about in titles. We could write a whole book about it, I think. But let's get back to the poem, Commute. So this is a good, simple title, is my point. I like it just as a way to introduce the poem and get you going. If it wasn't titled about the commute, you wouldn't know what was going on at first. It'd be confusing. Commute. Much heft to get from A to B, translated day in and day out to importance. I like the much heft. Some is repeated later, according to Cindy Gore. I didn't notice reading the first time. But I do like this stimulated my thoughts, because I have thought about that a lot, like how it's so weird that we commute, as far as we do, especially here in Southern California, where, I mean, we have people in our town that drive like 2 hours each way. And it's a lot of like hulking metal that's completely unnecessary to be transported. Like all you really need is your brain. It's just a lot of extra baggage in the car itself. So much heft to get from A to B, translated day in and day out to importance. That's interesting. Translated. I like the use of translated there, because that's kind of what we're doing. We're translating our time into productivity, into money, etc. We pray it's not just wishful thinking. And there's plenty of time for prayer or audiobooks or music or me time. So many translations. The translations is kind of repeated. Translations of stuck in traffic with the rest of the world's workers. Much heft. And then, there's the much heft repeated. Much heft. And then we get to the rule of 3 kind of thing too. There's a sort of an uncanny valley when you just have 2. 2 of something. Because really, when you have two of something, you're like, is that an accident or is that intentional? And that's kind of how your brain interprets it. Just because we're pattern recognition machines, and but then when you hit 3, you're like, oh, that's intentional. So 3 feels much better. So if you're gonna have a list where you're repeating this, it's good to do it a third time, and then you're sort of, your brain's satisfied. You get that little dopamine hit of like, oh, I recognize the pattern. I got it. Pat on the back, brain. And that's a positive feeling. Whereas with the 2, we're waiting for our suspicion about a pattern to be confirmed, and that sort of leaves us in that uncanny valley of like unsettledness where it doesn't feel right. Dick says, a disembodied brain commuting is a troubling image. Well, I mean, through Zoom, how we commute now. Katie Dozer says, I think some of this poem may benefit from zooming in closer on some of the individual commuters to give us a more unique POV than we have when commuting in real life. I think this poem has, it's a little closer than the last poem. The last poem had a real trouble just situating ourselves and making us feel like it was happening to us. This poem, especially the stanza, does a good job, but I think it could do a lot more of making us actually feel the commute. Much heft to get from mass exposure to city, machine and hammer translating earth into employment. We get the translating a third time. And I like the translating, though, earth into employment. I think it's a nice line. But the repetition, we're kind of saying the same things over and over again. Let's see. Dick says, could you further explain why you use uncanny valley as a template for repeating words? I just think it's the same thing. The uncanny valley is that that thing in computers or in robotics, where if something looks, is it really robotics? It's the whole field of like human-like things, and if something is like, we think of like, what is it? R2D2, the little trash can robot, is cute, because it's like so far away from a human. So it's a positive experience. But then when it gets a little bit close to a human, it feels a little weird, and like we're unsettled. And then if an AI robot looks exactly like a human and it's a perfect replica, like the Terminator 3 or whatever, then we feel comfortable with it, even though it's creepy. But the creepiness is in that like middle space between the two, and that's all I meant. It's just there's this like middle space where you feel unsettled, like and I think and the reason why I use that as a metaphor is I think that's literally what's happening. I think it's the same kind of thing. You're stuck in your brain's stuck in a processing rut where you see this pattern, you think you know what you're looking at, but you're not quite sure. You're waiting for it to be confirmed. So there's sort of like this unsettlingness to it, and I think that's why I just thought about the rule of 3 since I learned that someone mentioned, maybe in an interview years and years ago, that art has the rule of 3, which I didn't even realize because I never took an art class. But once I realized that the art does too, as well as poetry, it was something I wondered about a lot, and so I think that's what it is. Katie says, do you think repeating twice can be used successfully when the point is is for you to feel unsettled? Yeah, I think so. It's something to play with. There are a lot of really subtle things that you can do to manipulate people's like emotions as you're writing, like that you don't really pick up, but you pick up subconsciously, like varying sentence lengths certain ways, or like if you're trying to like numb, like have kind of a numbing thing to have the same sentence length for a while, you can kind of get that feel. There's like weird things like that. Yeah, and so you can, I think you can, but I think what you have to do, you realize, is that it leaves it with an unsettled, incomplete kind of feeling if you only do 2, which is why in art there's the rule of 3, and the same thing for lists. It just feels better to us. So I don't know. Yeah. And reroutes. Let's see. So much heft to get from mass exposure to city, machine and hammer translating earth into employment, and reroutes and traffic delays. You are a revolutionary. So here we shift to the you. Because we had the we all of a sudden. And this is one of those things where I'm not sure if the you, is this self-talk, or is this you speaking to the reader? Yeah. Just to go back, so Dick Westheimer says, makes sense with photographing. A basic rule is to place your subject in one of the 3 trinodes. Yeah, but the issue is why 3 and not 4? Like, why do we like odd numbers better? And I think it has to do with that. I think it's because it feels there's a pattern that emerges, and then we can it's easier to see the pattern. And we just our brains, we are pattern recognition. That's what our software is. It causes a lot of problems in the world because that's how our brains work. But that's what our brains do. That's how we evolved. And so we feel, we get a really little dopamine hit when we're like, oh, there's a pattern. Oh, yep. Got that pattern right. We feel good about it. And there's just this sense of feeling right. There's like a rightness that we feel when there's 3 or more. I mean, it doesn't have to be 3, but 3 is like the cutoff where you're like, this is an actual pattern. And Cindy Gore says odd creates movement. That's true too. Yeah, there's a stasis too, to things being balanced. Because with 3, it's like it's off kilter. So so it feels like something's gonna happen. And then with 2, it's sort of like it's already settled. And so it's not as stimulating. It feels flat. So that's another aspect of it too. So thanks for pointing that out, Cindy. Yeah. It's really interesting. I just find that fascinating. Because you do, though, when you see a poem like this and you see something repeated, even here, we have the much heft twice, but we have the translating 3 times. And the translating feels better because it feels like it's like intentional. Anyway, but back to the poem. You are a revolutionary. So the you comes in, and I'm not sure if the you is self-talk or talking to the reader, which is, but I don't know. It doesn't bother me as much in this poem as that sometimes would. Even if you were part of the traffic, if you are not yet tricked into thinking that they are building the world. Yeah, interesting. So, again, I like that this is a trick. You're tricked into thinking that they're building the world. It kind of leaves a question mark for us to like ponder at the end, which is a good way to end a poem. It's sort of, and it's this whole world. We start out with the, where is it? Translated day in and day out. We pray it's not just wishful thinking. So we're hoping that our commute is useful and we're actually doing something important. And then at the end we come back to that, but it never really solves that question. So it kind of just ponders and plays with this thought of, am I completely wasting my time? Which is how a commute feels, if you're not yet tricked into thinking that they are building the world. So, I don't know, I like the structure of this poem. I would just like to see it expanded, I think, and with a little more detail. Like Katie Dozier said, it'd be cool to sort of see more of the commute going on. I think the much heft, there's some concepts, I guess this is how I could put it. There's some concepts that are repeated, and they don't really add anything by being repeated. So it's almost like the poem is like fluffed out a little bit with these concepts of get the translation from one thing to another, which is interesting the first time you see it, but we sort of got it already. And then the much heft concept, it's a lot of weight to get from one place to another. That is another concept, but we only need it once, I think. So I think cutting those things down to just one, and then using actual concrete images and seeing what's going on and letting us really be situated in it as we're part of the. Well, that raises another question though. Why is it revolutionary? You are a revolutionary, even if you are part of the traffic. If you are not yet tricked into thinking that they are building the world, that revolutionary, it's not necessarily a bad thing that that's there, but I don't think it's a potential to be explained, because I don't know if I understand why we're revolutionaries. You are a revolutionary even if you are part of the traffic. So how are we revolutionaries? I mean, that's maybe the place that the poem could go as we expand a little bit and just give it more substance. But I like the concept that's being played with here is the relevance of your commute and whether or not you're wasting your entire life and all the energy and moving things around. It goes back to that moving pixels to pixels, or like moving metal from one parking spot to another. Are we really doing any good with it? Playing with that, I think it's an interesting concept to play with. Terry R says it kind of cool that revolutionary connects to a wheel going around. That's interesting. So that might be a way to expand that. Katie Dozier says, I think it is that people that see this, that this is not productive are revolutionary. Okay, that would make sense too. Yeah, so good comments there. That's Katie. So it's a revolutionary if you're not, willing to play along with this game of, there's that book Holes. Ever see that Disney movie Holes? And it's a summer camp and they make the kids dig holes. And it turns out there's a reason, but they just dig a hole and fill it in every day. And there's a feeling that that's all you're doing is like digging a hole so someone else can come at night and fill it in. And, to reject that as revolutionary, if that's what it is, and that's a, yeah. And then going to the revolution. Well, do wheels revolve or do they rotate? Anyway, but using that as a concept, yeah. So I think this is a place to expand. So I think what we can do is sort of get rid of the repetition, get a little bit more concrete, and expand on this concept. There's real substance in both these poems, I think, though. And it's just a matter of getting as much on the page as you can. So anyway, yeah, 2 interesting poems. Thanks for sharing these, Megan, and similar topics too, which is always interesting to see. I like seeing what it's always interesting when seeing how the poems, if a submission is like 4 poems, and seeing how they connect and what this person, at least at the moment, is sort of gnawing at is kind of always cool. It's one of the things that makes books of poetry cool. Let's look at the other poem now. It's 8 minutes past when we're supposed to. And the next poet is Todd Musser. And this is Devourer. And we get the publication date, I assume, because the other poem has that too, I noticed. So I don't think you should count that as an epigram. I think that's just like a note for when the poem was written. I don't think it matters. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Because the poems you'll see are very different when I kind of glanced at them. And I don't think they're much in common, and the dates are really different. So I think the date is just the date of composition. Todd Musser. Darkness crawls across the sky, devouring the light. The moon so full and stars twinkle. No more cloudless sky. Black darkness crawls across my soul, devouring the light. Heart full of hope, eyes a twinkle. No more clouded soul, bleak. So very short poem to start with. That's Devour. The next poem is longer, so we'll be quick with this one, I think. Devourer. Darkness crawls across the sky, devouring the light. So to start with, that is kind of an interesting concept, just to reverse the way you normally think of it. You normally think of like light being brought to darkness, but darkness consuming and pushing away the light is sort of an old, like the Egyptians thought of that a little more with Set and Seth or whatever. And so it's an interesting start to it. I'm intrigued a little bit at the beginning. The moon so full, the stars twinkle no more, cloudless sky, black. So even the stars are going out, I guess. I'm not sure about the capitalization, why the moon is capitalized. Here I think we're doing, we're not using periods, so the capitalization here I think means that this was an end sentence. That's how I interpret it. But why clouded? I guess because twinkle doesn't. So it's not that all the first lines are capitalized. So I'm not sure why clouded is capitalized either. The capitalization, I don't know what's going on. Yeah, so I'm not sure about the capitalization. Darkness crawls across my soul. And again, soul is a tough word. It's one of those super poet cliches that just feels melodramatic. And unless there's a really good way to work it in, I think I have one poem where I use soul at the end of my own poem, and but because I call it a ship in a bottle and go on about that, it's just compacting it in a different metaphor, which can sometimes work. But if you're just talking souls, it's like hearts and it's like love and it's like certain things that they're just cliched concepts. And kind of there's a melodramatic quality to it too. So the soul is one of those words. Devouring the light, heart full of hope, eyes a twinkle, no more clouded soul, bleak. So we really just don't get much going on here. I mean, we get this raw, it's a lyric poem, it's capturing an emotion, but we don't know what any of the situation is or how to relate to it. It's one of those things, I think, maybe I get a sense of maybe it being a breakup poem. Like this is the feeling you get after, losing a relationship, something like that, where there's no light left anywhere and the stars no longer twinkle. But there's not, that's just a guess. There's not any kind of detail to go on. It's just a sort of feeling, there's very disembodied feeling to this poem. And so I'm just going to say what we say a lot is like, tell us what's really going on. Even a lyric poem, a lyric poem is more based on the emotion of things and not narrative. You still need enough of a concrete sense of where to place the emotion. There still needs to be a container for the emotion. And so, if you look at the like Chinese poetry will have these long titles that explain the situation before they get into the lyric of the feeling of what's going on around it. And that's the kind of thing that we sort of need to relate to a poem, because we relate to the specific details, because those are what draw you in and sort of engage your empathy by like feeling like you're in the situation. And if it's disembodied like this with just the emotion, there's just nothing to connect to. It's like it's like a cloudy thing swirling around that you just can't touch. And I think that's what's going on here. Katie Dozier says, almost feels like the second stanza is the first edit of the initial stanza. Yeah, it does. There's this repetition too. It becomes, it takes the, it's a change from the universal to the personal. Like this darkness consuming the moon ends up consuming me as well. Like the stars become the eyes and things like that. So there's this transition here where it's like the whole world is, and I am, becoming darkness. And there's just no sense of like what's going on for us to connect to. So it's one of those things where you have to kind of know the situation in order to know what's going on. And the poet who wrote it knows what feeling or what event inspired this feeling or what instigated whatever's going on in the poem, but we have no idea. And so we're just like fumbling around in the dark, no pun intended, trying to figure out what it really means. And so concrete details, even if you're not telling the story, it's still important to have something to like hold on to and situate yourself within the poem. Let's see. But that is the thing that you get a lot of pushback from, because there's a lot of, modern art and things that do evoke emotions, Rothko or something. Where there's no sense of context or what you're really looking at, but you still get that sense of like the sublime or something. And so, a lot of poets will say, I'm just doing that. But I just don't think it works. I don't think that the way, I don't know, language is intertwined with image. It's hard to think of a poem that works on that kind of level of like a Rothko painting. Dick Westheimer points out too, eyes a twinkle is cliche, and so is eyes twinkle. Yeah, eyes twinkling. And there are several of those though. Yeah. So anyway, so ground this more, and with some concrete, let us know the situation so we can appreciate it, because otherwise we just don't know how to appreciate it. I think that's what it comes down to. Let's see. Jenny Middleton over on Facebook says, I don't think the line "No More Clouded Soul" bleak works, because who wants a clouded soul? Oh, that's a good point too. Yeah. Although I think maybe because there are no periods, this might be an end stop. So heart full of hope, eyes a twinkle no more. And then that's the end of that. And then clouded soul. So now the soul's clouded. So I think it's just the lack of punctuation that made that confusing. Oh, yeah, and so Nate Jacobs says this too. This was his reply. The no more is meant to modify the heart and eyes. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Yeah. So the other thing that I already mentioned, just the inconsistent punctuation and capitalization also make it difficult to read for things like that. Like, you don't want people to get confused just on the basics of like what the sentence is. Unless you're, if you're E. E. Cummings playing with that, then great. If you're, if it's intentional and you're trying to make us confused, a lot of haiku poets do that too. With a one-line haiku, one of the big popular things in Gendai haiku, the more modern type haiku, is to play with that, where you're reading it one way and then it shifts to reading it the other way, and there's real pleasure in that when there's that two worlds existing at the same time feel. And you can do that. You can play with that with something like this, but it's really hard to pull off. A lot of times it just leaves us confused. Okay, let's look at the longer poem now. This is Day Hike. And again, we're looking at Todd Musser poems, Day Hike. And I think this is the day that it happened, so don't pay attention to the date. Day Hike. And again, now we're getting, we know a little bit about what's going on. We're hiking in the day. So start us off with some grounding. That's good. On the trail, but off the road, muddy ground that's fit for toads. Rain splits rocks by shattered trees, cooling, flowing, freshening breeze. Rainbow lichens in the sun, snow-capped peaks, a morning's fun. Puppy dogs that walk themselves, little flowers fit for elves. Rippled earth, frosted trees, tiny blooms, blowing leaves, granite boulder monoliths, 'neath the sun a hawk side slips. Fallen branches, twisted oak, giant's hand that through earth broke. Hoofprints, cow pies, show the way. We travel not alone today. Winding paths wend in and out. Watch for rock slides, shh, don't shout. Poetry and rocks and trees, little streamlets ripple, please. Over rise and through the pines, precocious flowers, spring first signs. Little shelves on trailside branch. Snow-fed waters, what a wrench. Or snowside bench, trailside bench, I should say, sorry. Snow-fed waters, what a wrench. Following a lithesome wench, children piled up like defeated French. Interesting. Little bat flutters by, beneath the waters tumble, fly. Gentle thunder rocks washed from leafy cover, icy flow that we pass over. Little remnant patch of snow hiding where the sun won't glow. Gathered masses chowing down, laughter, smiling, joy, no frowns. Widening path through brushes spied, rushing past the water slide. We cross on rocks and slip on spills, hands on toes begin to chill. Children riding pick-a-back, clearly mom, she is not slack. Freckled landscape, boulder strewn, rests beneath the sun and moon. Picture perfect nature's arches, twin supported leaning larches. Venture up the final hill, feel the burn, feel the thrill. Shadows grow all afternoon, sun starts setting, evening soon. Sitting now with family, friends, hoping hiking never ends. Let's reflect at end of trail on him who loves us without fail. Creator God, Adonai, praise him who reigns on high. Natural beauty manifold, it's supernatural what he behold. Man's inspired by what's wrought by him, who hung on a tree to save from sin, and broken is this world we see. Imagine the perfection of eternity. Colors richer, love so deep, as with our God, our lives he keeps. Seek for him with all your heart, never from his ways depart. Steep yourself in his word as creation's voices are around us heard. Love the Lord with all your heart, and love your neighbors the other part. Follow this, his perfect law, and he'll redeem you should you fall. Beautiful lichen, oh so sweet, laces falling from my feet, joyful running with my friends, hope this day will never end. So interesting. So this is Day Hike, and it's very so. Having read a whole lot of children's books in the last decade, for bedtime story time, which we used to do with two kids separately because they're like 6 years apart, or 4 years apart. Geez. So a lot of storytime books. I can say this is very sing-songy and nursery rhyme-ish, but it's wonderful in that it actually the meter works, which so many children's books it doesn't, and it's so obnoxious to read. So this is a poem that would actually make a really good children's book. And Mark Viner says the language is tortured to make the rhymes, too many of which are trite. I think this could be better, reduced in size without the rhymes, with more metaphorical use of the landscape. So, yeah. So so it's sing-songish and like nursery rhyme-ish in its style, and it depends what you want to do with it. I mean, there's a reason why those things work. You can imagine each stanza being a page in a children's book. And I think maybe, from that perspective, maybe a little too long. The turn to the religious isn't really foreshadowed any way that I see. So maybe I'd get some foreshadowing up there and shorten it a little bit if I were doing that. And then it could work for that. The problem with this kind of sing-songy verse, where it's sort of, as Mark said, tortured a little bit to fit the rhyme, and everything is true. So it has the same rhythm throughout the whole thing with the end-stopped rhymes in every stanza. You know exactly what's coming. And so for somebody who, for adults who've read a lot, it ends up being just so repetitive that it's not engaging. Yeah. So Mark Viner says a children's book, it has possibilities. I agree. Yeah, but it's really well written for a children's book story, actually. So it depends what you want to do with it. For an audience of adults, though, look at a poet like A.E. Stallings or Dana Gioia or any of the new formalist types, A.M. Juster, to see how to work formalism in so it doesn't feel sing-songy. Because they're using enjambment where the sentences run past the lines, so there's sort of surprising mixes of the way the words fit together. It's how you keep sort of adults engaged. It's that much variety within the form is what we're really looking for, because that it doesn't. We don't know what to expect. I think when you're a younger kid and you're just acquiring language, those kind of books and that sing-songiness, the nursery rhyme stuff, helps with language acquisition, and so kids are drawn to that. But adults kind of get bored with the repetitiveness. And even if you look at like Frost or something, look at any, To Earth Where Love was I can't remember, but look at a Frost poem, and see how the enjambment works. That's 150 years old. And see how not 150, I guess 100, and see how the enjambment works and how the poem flows through lines, and there's not that repetition in any Frost poem. There's variation between how the rhythms and the rhymes are operating, and that's because we're an audience of readers who have been reading forever. We don't need to memorize things. I think part of it is that poetry's foundation is in this oral history of using it for story recording and language acquisition. And so a little bit we're drawn to that just through our evolution of the way that we developed, because we had no way to write it down before the printing press in mass. And so you had to memorize things in order for stories to be recorded. And so our brains are all tuned to that. But the problem is that we're all a literate society. We're all adults who've been reading forever. We read, even if it's just like Twitter, we read all day, every day. We read more than we ever have. And so there's ways to record it so that those two uses aren't really necessary anymore. And so it ends up being boring. And just kind of repetitive and we call it sing-songy. That's what we mean by sing-songy, is it just feels like we know exactly what's coming every time. And so it's not surprising or as interesting or stimulating. And so that's the thing to play with, is like look at a Frost poem or look at a more modern A.E. Stallings, or Patricia Smith does great. I mean, we have this, look at Motown Crown. It goes on and on forever about Motown and a heroic crown of sonnets. And you'll never see these patterns repeat in this way. Like there's something really interesting about the pattern sort of being in the background that we like a lot. But when the pattern's really in your face, it's too much. So see, Nate Jacob says, were it not so long, the simple scheme would at least make for some pleasure. Avoid the forced language, cut it down. Another thing too, yeah. So you can get sort of sing-songy and have it work. A great poet to look at is Wendy Vidalock. She was on the Rattlecast, and I think we have a poem of hers. I don't know where the new issue is. There's a poem of hers that's like only had like 10 words in the new issue. And that's sing-songy, but it's short enough and interesting enough that it never gets boring. And she does that. She plays with that a lot really well too, with breaking the lines across. So it'll have, with her, a lot of her poems, it'll be a very stable pattern, or even if it's a short poem. But then she'll break it and insert rhymes in the middle so it feels a little different at the same time. So that's something you can play with too if it's a really short poem. Yeah, so it depends what you want to do with this. I think I think children's books are something that is really overlooked. And the writing, I never knew this until I had kids. But if you look at all the books in the library, like we've read like every children's book in our local library, it's the illustrator that like rules the day. The poems are picked and go to press not because the writing is well done, but because whoever did the pictures made good pictures. And so there's a real opening, I think, for better children's books. And so if that's something you're interested in, and having, your perspective, on the way that this moves into religion, like religious oriented children's books, I don't know, that there could be something there. So don't feel free to go in that direction, I would say too. There are a few things I do want to point out where I would, even if it's going the sing-songy children's book direction, which is fine to do, there are a few lines. Let me see if I can pick out a couple. Let's see. Oh, that wouldn't. If it was children's books, I wouldn't go with "Lithsome Wench." Where's one? There are a few where the syntax is like flipped around just to fit the meter, and those felt off. And sometimes where the articles are dropped to fit the meter as well. Yeah, I mean, it's not a great example, but praise to him who reigns on high. Let's see. Yeah, here, as with our God, our lives, he keeps the flipping of that. He keeps it only on the end so it can rhyme with deep. That kind of thing, you can still fix that too as well. As creation's voices, again, this is like that inversion to fit the rhyme. As creation's voices around us heard, to get the heard word rhyme. Yeah. Yeah, Mark Grenier says the offset couplet. I was thinking this might be, again, like the date up here. I think this might be other lines that were possibilities, and maybe that's not actually part of the poem. Oops, here. So I think maybe these were just alternate last lines that were like part of the editing and revision process that just kind of got left there when the poem was submitted. I think that might be it. So it might be little shelves on trail, side bench, children piled up like defeated French. Maybe. That's kind of how I thought that was just an artifact of the editing and writing process, and a note to save for later. But maybe I'm wrong. Let's see. Yeah. Another thing to do too, Mark Grenier points this out, in the case the end-stopped rhymes could be softened by some that are not end-stopped. Yeah, and the other thing too, there was one nice, it's right here. So we had leafy cover. Yeah, the cover over. The slight difference in sound there. Is another thing. Those are the slightly slant rhymed. Cover over, because it's and o. Cover over. And so playing with that makes it feel less sing-songy too, if that's the direction you're trying to go to. So it's both the enjambment of like letting the sentences run through the lines, so this line would continue into this, and then you can play with and break that up and mix it up in different ways that are stimulating to the ear. And then you can also do these slant rhymes, where because the problem is everything, we know exactly the sound we're going to hear at the end. And when that happens, that's when we get bored. So the slant rhymes can fix some of that too. And I think that was the only one I noticed, actually, the cover over. There might be others, but that's one of the ones that stood out, I guess. Let me see. Sin and hymn is kind of a little bit, but you could do that more. Most of them are just perfect, though. Law and fall is a nice slant rhyme. So a couple, but you can, if you did that like the whole time, it wouldn't feel as sing-songy. Like if every end rhyme was like law and fall, which is similar, it's intentional, you can hear it, but it's not perfect, so it opens up the range of possibilities for what the ear can expect, which lets it feel more fresh the whole way through. So you could do that the whole way through and not have true rhymes and get away with a sing-songy rhythm like that. That's another possibility. But anyway, I think that's going to be it for today. Let's see if we have any other. Kashiana Singh says stimulating is a key word. Generally, stimulation is what's missing in this one. The speaker's own stimulation does not get conveyed on the page. Yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, it's so focused on the rhythm and the rhyme that the story doesn't really come out as well as it could. And the movement from, we get nice descriptions throughout the poem, and then we move to this religious, God appears. Where was it? Yeah, suddenly we're reflecting on all of this, and then that's all of a sudden where God appears, like almost 2 pages in. Is that right? Did God not appear? Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah. So almost, that's 60-70% into the poem, God appears, and it's not. And I don't feel like the transition is justified really in the story. So if I were looking at this, we already talked about condensing it. A lot of it would be condensing down the beginning sections where we get the description, and then sort of foreshadowing what you're going to be talking about a little bit, because when God appears, it's sort of, we don't know where it came from, and then the rest of the poem goes through that. So there's a little bit of an imbalance going on as well in the poem. Let's see. Yeah, so Veena Kumar says both the patterns and the ideas need to stimulate and surprise at times with insight or wit. Problam says, hello, Tim. I really love and admire your videos. Is it possible to review a poem published by Rattle? What worked in that? Yeah, we do that. We've done that a couple times, and I've been planning on doing that like once a month-ish. So we'll probably do that in a couple weeks. If anybody has any suggestions for a poem you'd like me to go over in Rattle, well, just let me know. The narrator is also intent. This is Dick Westheimer. The narrator is also intent on delivering a message, which makes the poem fine as a personal piece, but not as a public piece full of surprise. That's true, unless, children's books are having a message. They often have a message of some kind of moral lesson or whatever. And that's another thing. Like we're trying to teach kids, and people have different opinions and values about what's important to be teaching. But teaching good values to kids is part of children's books too. But we as adults, again, are grown up past that and don't respond to moralized teaching. So the fact that the narrator is delivering a message, that's another one of those things that would work okay if it was a children's book. But for adults, it's just kind of off-putting that we're being preached at. So that's another aspect too. So it depends where you want to go with your poetry. But I think, it could potentially go either way. So tightening up and making it, writing more for a mature audience or writing more for children. And if you do write for adults, that's why, poems, we talk a lot about poems as tools for our own understanding. And that's how you get around the sort of preaching and delivering a message aspect of poetry. If it's something that you don't really understand completely and can't articulate, you're figuring out in the process, then it doesn't feel preachy at all to a reader. But if it's something where you know exactly what you want to tell us, you're just like, why write a poem about it? Like, why, I don't need to hear your opinion about stuff. I have my own opinions. We all have opinions. And so it's it's that act of exploring our own understanding that's appealing to more mature poetry. And to, so if you go in that direction, that's what you're trying to do, try to find a way, find something that you don't understand. And, how, it is a question to me, at least reading the poem, how God appears in this stuff. And it's clear that it does for the speaker. So that question of why God is there is an interesting thing that could be explored. And if we came to sort of an understanding through language into how God appeared in this hiking scene, and what it means to see God through that, appear in that way, then that's something that's really interesting and worth reading for adults. But if it's just, the prescribed message, then it's not as interesting. So that's another aspect too. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it. Bernard Haskey says, "Why not spell out God, not G-D?" That's a religious thing. Some Jewish traditions and others don't believe in writing it out. Because putting down the God's name is like fixing it. Bernard Haskey says, "What is the defeated French as well?" I'm not sure. I'm not sure those lines fit, so I'm not sure what that does. Yeah, and so Mark Grenier says, "How does this day hike landscape manifest divinity?" That's the thing. I think to the poet it does, and it's an interesting thing to explore, like the how does it. And I'm interested. I'd love to read a poem about that explores how God appears in this day hike scene, and not just like stating that God does. So for me as an adult reader, that's what I want to hear. But if it's a children's book, you don't have to do that. It's just a fact, because kids can't figure stuff out. I mean, we have occasionally we get some books that people just send me that are a children's book written by poets, and the reverse happens actually, where they're written as like a poet would, exploring some kind of thing and having like ambiguity and confusion and not quite sure and trying to make sense of it. And then the book just makes no sense, and the kids are just like lost. Like kids they're only like 5 or 6 years old. They need stuff to be clear. They need the messaging to be clear. They're not going to pick up the messaging at all. They're going to be like, what? So it's two totally different things you're writing for. So it works with sort of being preachy. I mean, you want to preach things in kids' books. You just do. Jenny Middleton says, "Little Flowers Fit for Elves" is a magical reference rather than a religious one. The romantic poets saw God in the power of nature. That's a good point. Yeah, good point. Let's see. Dick Westermer says kids respond better to images than lessons and moralizing too. I'm not sure if that's the case. I don't know if I agree, because kids are sort of looking for. They're looking to me. They're so lost in not understanding the world. I mean, like the world is so confusing already. What it kind of is, and so having things that make sense. It depends what age, but if you're talking about the kind of book where each page would be a stanza and then it would be like illustrated, and then so that would be age like 3 to 6 or something, which is what the age here. I think having images that don't have some kind of like lesson to place them with, like, or storytelling that doesn't have a purpose, I think they feel a little lost with it. I think they need some kind of moralizing, actually. I think they're drawn to that at that age. Then older, once you get sort of the moral foundation under your feet and sort of know your place within the world a little bit, even at like 6 or 7 or 8, then complicating that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so exactly what Deborah T said, depends on the age of the kid. Yeah, so once you have like a moral framework and a grounding, then kids are drawn to the ambiguities and things and things that just aren't as clear. But at that earlier age, I think kids are really drawn to stories that have a lesson. I think they're craving lesson. They really are. I mean, you can just see it reading story time to kids, So let's see. Katie Dozier says God's Commute could be a poem. That's interesting. I'm not sure what. It's kind of a combination of the two poems. I think that's a challenge for somebody to write. That'd be a good poem, God's Commute. Okay, so that's going to be the end of the show today. But thanks, everybody. It was interesting poems to look at. Todd Musser, and we had the date hike, and we had Devourer. So Dick Westheimer says, so we're still talking about this. So Goodnight Moon, Dick Westheimer points out, has no lesson, just image. Yeah, I mean, maybe. But I think the Goodnight Moon, I think that success is because we, as parents, enjoy reading that a little more. Like, we enjoy the ambiguity of it and the little bit of strangeness that's in it. And I think we read and reread that one because the parents like it. I think even looking at I don't know. I don't know. You can just sense that they're looking for meaning, I think, in my opinion. And Deborah T says kids enjoy fantasy stuff too and doesn't always need the morality stuff. But I don't know. The morality is like baked into fantasy type stories, though. I don't know. I mean, we just have to. I'll have to think about this more. It's one of those things I haven't thought about in depth. But I think, I don't know. I've just sensed that over the years. I'll have to think about that more. Maybe it's possible. I'll think about Goodnight Moon, some other examples, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, but like I was saying, that is the show for today. The other poem was Devourer by Todd Musser. And then we had Commute and a work study gig in the audio visual department by Megan Wildhood. So that was the critique for this week. Now, let me show you who the guest on the Rattlecast is going to be coming up. The guest will be on Monday, the new time, Katie Bickham. That is Rattlecast 149. The prompt was to write if this were a blank poem. And that's a person. So we have the example from last week's episode with what's his name? Mark Gibbons. If this were a Sam Shepard poem. And then we go through what a poem would be if it were a Sam Shepard poem. So that is your prompt for this week, is to do if this were a blank poem and fill in with some kind of figure or personality. And so that is the prompt for this week. Katie Bickham is the guest. And I should mention, too, that the Rattle Poetry Prize, I can't believe it's June 24th already. There's only like 3 weeks till the deadline for the Rattle Poetry Prize, so I should just put this up, too. If you haven't put your submission in yet, start working on your poems. Get those in by July 15th, which is really coming up quick. I can't even, I don't know. I haven't done enough marketing. It's been a tough, it's been a weird month. So, but it's already June 24th, which means 3 weeks to go for the Rattle Poetry Prize. So do send your submissions in. Great contest. Always $15,000 for the winner. But that'll be July 15th. But of course, next week's guest is Katie Bickham, Monday, June 27th. The regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific. We'll talk to you then. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime. See you later.